So I'm Ara Krikorian. I run the commercial industrial division of Solar Optimum, and I'll get right into it. We can go to the next slide. Overview of what we're going to go over, it doesn't matter. So there's a little bit about our company. We're the 8th largest solar company in the commercial sector. Naturally, you have residential, you've got utility scale solar companies. We're somewhere in the middle. We do have a residential division. It makes up about 20% of our business. 80% of our business is strictly with commercial clients. And in that realm, we're number 8 in the nation, even though we only operate in California. So 50% of the market is here, so that's not that big of a stretch, but having a focus of only California but still being as large as we are is it's a pretty big accomplishment. And again, we're number 2 in California and number 1 in LA, but we're just patting ourselves on the back with all this. So.
That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah. So again, we're a commercial residential company. We have both divisions. They're completely separate. We're also very efficient and lean. Compared to any company that does the volume that we do, we have a fraction of the headcount, and we're vertically integrated. So we do all our installs ourselves. So that allows us to be profitable and here for over 10 years now, as opposed to most companies in our industry usually have a 2 to 3 year lifespan. And then they recycle themselves somehow. We are technology agnostic, so we're not married to a specific type of technology on the photovoltaic side or a certain company. We tailor our projects specifically for what's best for the client, and that allows us to bring more value. And again, we're vertically integrated, so we're able to control our quality, not relying on subcontractors to soil that, where we have to come back and fix issues that they cause. And again, that allows us to be here as long as we've been. Just a little bit of the industry background. Solar really comes from Einstein. The only Nobel Prize he won was for the photovoltaic effect. And that's what solar is based on. So it took about 50 years for that to actually go through and have an R&D process where they built a solar cell that capitalized on that technology that he had envisioned way back when. And Bell Labs did that in 1953, and that initial generation of solar cells that were very inefficient still functions today. So when people talk about the lifespan of solar projects and how long they will continue to work, for something that is a very old technology, it still functions. So all the projects that you have now, they degrade, but they will continue to function for decades. They're warranted for 25 years, so when I'm showing cash flows to clients, I like to keep my cash flows down to 25 years because that's the warranted period, but it will continue to function at at a small decrease every year. It's about 0.5% per year that it degrades at. And again, the first applications of this were for space, your satellites. It was an incredibly expensive technology to use for anything. The only industry that ended up using solar at the time was in space. In the 2000s, it really started to pick up steam because there was a national and state policies that drove the industry forward, just like they did for all the other types of energy. And through the subsidies then that ended a few years ago, we're at cost parity with the industry right now, and we'll get more into that too. Next slide. Again, we started off at probably $76, if not more, a watt, which is an incredibly high number, and now we're in the sub 30 cents per watt for the cells itself. Again, the modules are a little bit more expensive than that once you put it all together and have a commercially viable solar panel. But it all starts with policy, and then it trickles down into incentives, trying to implement those policies, and then eventually you end up with where we are right now, where you have the lowest cost of energy, second to wind. It's benefiting the environment, so the environmental stewardship is a byproduct of these savings to businesses. And it also is one of the fastest growers of jobs in the US and the fastest employer of veterans. So it comes full circle and brings a lot of benefits. Coming to the costs, a lot of people discuss, oh, well, it's an incentivized industry. We're for free markets and we don't want to support anything that's being pushed by a certain agenda. That's not the case because every single technology, whether it's nuclear, whether it's coal, whether it's natural gas, solar, wind, they are all incentivized, and a lot more so with the fossil fuels. When you look at the unsubsidized levelized cost, which is what all the utilities base their economics on, the lowest cost of energy is by far wind right now, and second to that is solar. So unsubsidized, without any of these benefits, when you take into account all your gas peakers, your biomass, coal, every different type of technology, you end up with solar and wind as the lowest cost, which is why PG&E, Southern California Edison, SDG&E, all your utilities, their main increases in energy generation is coming from solar. The biggest installers of solar projects are your utilities. They're not going for coal, they're not going for natural gas because those are actually a lot more costly. They take a lot more maintenance over the long term, they cause a lot of other issues, and they're higher costs. So there's actually no reason to be trying to push your conventional forms of energy when your renewable forms are a lower cost option for not only us, but the utilities when it hits their bottom line. Next slide. There are many different types of projects. You've got on-site, which is what we normally do. We do projects at the facilities. You've got ground mounts, rooftops, carports. Carports look like that. This is an almond farm in the middle of the Central Valley. This is San Francisco Airport that I had done. So you've got different applications for installing solar, and then you have off-site, which is essentially what the utilities do. They build these massive solar farms, and then they use that energy for their own grid. And there's a few different things with that. Technologies, you've got many different types. You've got different branches within it. You've got the silicon side, which is a majority of the commercial industry. And then on the utility scale, you really see thin films taking over and have been the major provider of energy. And there's different flavors of each one. So it's just touching upon this. And again, we're technology agnostic, so we're not married to any specific one of these. I've actually used every single one at this point. Yeah.
Every single one.
Most companies, if you go back actually, most companies stick to poly or monocrystalline silicon. So a lot of commercial solar companies just use one product with one brand, and that's what their purchasing power allows them to do. Next slide. Utility bills are incredibly convoluted. You've got how much energy you're using versus how you're using it, the time. She was just going over how the critical peak period, critical peak pricing has a huge increase to the cost per unit of energy that you're paying for. All these things, that factors into the time of use. The different rate schedules. If you're a really big business versus a small business, you have in PG&E and Southern California Edison, you've got dozens upon dozens of different types of rate schedules and how they price different businesses and what the rates are at different times. So, and then you have seasonality. Winter and summer has completely different rates. So all these things usually confuse commercial clients, industrial clients, even residential clients a good amount. And they definitely capitalize on certain aspects of this. And I'll get more into it in the next slide. So the entire solar industry on the commercial and residential side even is based on this thing called net energy metering. And what this allows anyone who installs solar to do is you are getting credited for the solar generation, the credits that you're producing for those. You're not using all that energy. Most of the energy is going back into the grid. Your neighbors are using it. The utility is using it to a small fraction. But you're getting credited for every unit you're producing. Now, solar only produces, let's say, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. effectively. You're getting credited at these higher retail rates, and then if you continue using the energy or you use it more at night, you're essentially arbitraging that rate. So if you're producing at 45 cents and you're getting credited at 45 cents, but the energy is being used at a 13-cent period, you're essentially getting 3-4-fold value per unit. That's why doing 100% offset of your business doesn't make sense usually. A lot of companies will try to just give the most they can because it'll increase their revenues. But if you actually dive into the the paybacks on the system and what produces the most value, usually see somewhere around 80% producing the best value for a commercial business. And that will vary from company to company and how they use their energy and where they're located. But the entire industry is based on something called net energy metering. And the reason that it's so lucrative in terms of savings to companies is because of this mechanism, net energy metering. Next slide. Demand response, which we just talked about, but the more what I'm talking about and what the solar side is seeing as a benefit is peak shaving. Solar does not affect how you're using your energy. It just affects how much energy they can produce to offset your business. Utilities really get their clients on these peaks. If you have one peak at any point in the entire month, in a 15-minute interval period, your entire demand bill, the demand side of your bill, is based on that single peak. So let's just say that this line is 100 kilowatts of energy that your business is using. And you're constantly using 100 kilowatts, and that's essentially, you have a high and a low around there. But in the morning when you turn on all the equipment, or at some point you have this massive peak that lasts a very short period of time, if that peak is 200 kilowatts, all of a sudden your bill is 2x what it realistically should be if you didn't have that individual peak. So batteries are starting to come into the industry, battery storage, to offset this specific issue. If you're able to just chop those peaks off, not let those happen by offsetting it with your own batteries, you're able to cut a significant portion of your bill with a small investment on the battery side. And again, this is because a single 15-minute spike at any point in your month will set that rate for your company. So it's for the entire month. So you have one peak that's 5 times bigger than your average loads, and all of a sudden your bill for that demand portion will be 5 times, no matter what you do the rest of the month. Your bill is based on that one peak. So chopping that peak is a whole other side of this business, and it has nothing really to do with solar. A lot of companies will claim that solar is going to decrease their loads. It will, but if you have one cloud roll over your business...
They're not practices pervasive throughout the energy provider?
Yes. On the commercial side, absolutely.
So
this will start trickling into the residential side too.
EID, PG&E, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. It's prevalent in every utility, and I'm sure you can attest to this. The demand portion of your bill exists no matter what business you are. Unless you're a very tiny business, an office, that's...
How do they get away with that?
That's a question above my head. That's the public utilities and the state legislature. I mean, this is something that has been agreed upon for. I mean, we're not talking about 2-3 years. This has been going on for decades. So demand is something that exists on the utility side.
First I've ever heard.
It's take a look at your bill and you'll see you've got the charge for kWh, which is how much energy you're using, and then kW is how much power you're using. So it's how you're using it versus how much you're using.
Well, it also depends on your rate.
Yes, I mean...
If you're on an A10 or...
A1, I think, is the only one that doesn't have it.
Okay, A1. Well, and when we had A6 in PG&E, but we don't have that.
Well,
in-
Bill and I are subsidized because we're over 70.
Okay, well, there you go.
There you go, yeah.
No, I'm teasing.
This is actually starting to trickle into the residential side too. So they're gonna, they have time of use on the residential side that didn't exist before. This is, I mean, let's go a little bit off topic. I don't know how much time we have. I'll try to make it quick. But let's say that there is a half-hour period during the day that all of a sudden you have this massive increase because every facility is turning on all their equipment.
Okay.
These plants, these big natural gas plants, coal plants, whatever they are, they don't fluctuate very well.
No,
They turn them on,
spike.
and you just leave them on. So for them to deal with a massive spike, it's a very difficult task. It's not like it doesn't have the flexibility to deal with that. So the way they disincentivize companies not being efficient on how they're using their energy.
You're defending them now.
I think there is a rational basis for both sides of this, on the client side as well as.
To charge you when the spike is high.
Yes.
There's not a rational basis for them to charge you that for the entire month.
I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, so that's my point.
That I agree with, and I think that should be something that on the policy side we can definitely discuss. So that being said, that is a big issue on how people are billed, and that's part of the discussion on every single project. On the incentive side, the reason solar is such a big savings of operational costs to businesses is because you have the 30% tax credit. That's a federal tax credit. And then you get to depreciate this as a business, whereas you don't get to do that if you're a residential customer who installs a solar system at their house. You have a maker's depreciation basis with a 40% bonus year one. So you're essentially getting a 40% depreciation in year one with a 5.5-year depreciation basis for the state. That's if you're an LLC. If you're a corporation, you just have a 10-year straight line depreciation for your state taxes. On the federal side, this year you have a 100% bonus. So actually the new tax plan benefited solar in one way. There's a lot of different things that have happened that have disincentivized solar, but you do have a massive tax depreciation on the federal level in year one. And then rebates, local incentives, a lot of those have dried out, but without those, this is still a very quick payback and a very lucrative investment for most corporations, and that's why I have a lot of multinational and U.S. corporations installing this over their entire portfolio in a majority of states. So next slide. This is what it all really comes down to. So it doesn't matter how big the project is. This is a $3.7 million project, and that might be a small project for a really big business, but that might be 10 times bigger than what a small commercial business utilizes. The economics will almost always look the same. You'll have slight differences in fixed costs, but you're looking at a 20 to 30% unlevered internal rate of return. So if you're thinking of any investment other than your own business, I'm very hard-pressed to figure out if there is a single stock with near zero risk you would be getting a 20 to 30% IRR on. Some people like looking at ROI. A lot of companies like simple paybacks. I think that's not the best way to look at a investment, but you're looking, every single commercial project that we do, we see a 2 to 4 year simple payback. And having economics that are this incredible for a business, whether it's a small business or a massive business, is an incredible savings. And you can see for that, again, a 25-year cash flow, because that's the warranted period of the asset. If you're saving $16.5 million to a business over 25 years, yes, it'll cost you $3.7 million, but when they look at the rate of return on that, and you're getting a 20% IRR or 30%, I've seen upwards of 40, but that's in areas that have very high incentives other than the tax credits and the depreciation. You're normally seeing a 20 to 30% IRR, unlevered. And then if you put leverage, if you finance that, that increases significantly. You end up having you're cash flow positive from day one. You'll usually see a lower total savings because someone else is making some interest on financing it, but you will be cash flow positive day one. And a majority of my clients don't go with the financed option. They'll self-finance it or get a loan themselves, but they outright buy it. They don't go for a lease or a power purchase agreement. Next slide. Jobs. This is a really big discussion point nowadays. Solar employs over 373,000 people nationwide, and this is from a couple years ago. The entire fossil fuel industry, your coal, natural gas, oil, petroleum, advanced gas, employs a lot less. And we're talking about people who are running the coal plants, the natural gas plants, nuclear plants, the installation of those. When you're comparing apples to apples, you have a lower cost option that produces more jobs. It's a no-brainer when it comes to that. Next slide. So solar makes up only 1.2% of the national energy generation, the makeup. Fossil fuels make up about 63%. 375,000 jobs versus 187. Upwards of 1 million if you count the sourcing of the fuel too. But again, worst case scenario, if you're counting the entire fossil fuel industry as 1 million people being employed, you're looking at 20 people more per unit from solar, upwards of 100, if you're not counting the generation of the fuel, of jobs per unit. That's at a lower cost too. We're not talking about throwing all these bodies at it and it's producing a higher cost fuel. You're getting more jobs for a lower cost. And it's also the fastest growing employment sector for veterans. Summarizing this, I mean, you've got a huge savings. The other thing is you're mitigating future rate hikes. So you're essentially locked into the rate tariff, rate schedule you're on when you install solar, and you're offsetting any increases in those utility rates. So utility rates for the past few years, for a plethora of reasons, have been going up at 5, 6, 7%. A couple of years ago, we had an 18% increase in PG&E due to a completely unrelated utility. Southern California Edison closed down one of their nuclear power plants, and that just has a pervasive effect throughout the entire energy industry. So these rate hikes will be offset by the generation that you have on site too. So that's another huge portion of the benefits of solar. You're mitigating these rate hikes. Energy reliability, that's a portion of it. You can do a microgrid too, where you couple these batteries with solar and you have an off-grid capability. Environmental stewardship, most companies don't do this for the greening aspect, but there is no questioning the PR and marketing benefits. That's a fringe benefit to solar. Solar they do it for the dollars and cents. Most of these large corporations, the malls we've done, an airport here, businesses there, they do this because it saves them a significant amount of money. The greening aspect of the environment and their business and the clients, whoever it may be, that's a byproduct that we all get to leverage. Marketing, PR, again, that I kind of dived into that. We have our own marketing and PR division. So when we do a project with a client, we actually do a ribbon cutting with dignitaries. We do a video feed. We'll put it on YouTube. We try to leverage it for ourselves and them, but there is no discounting the marketing and PR benefit of it, especially in California.